Thank you so much for joining us today for Inbox to Impact, maximizing email marketing for manufacturers. We have the IQ Connection team today. My name is Haley. I am the marketing department manager. We also have a special guest, Jay, who will be talking a little bit about the ins and outs of email. But I will kick things off to Ariel so she can introduce herself.
Thank you. Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Ariel. I am an account manager here at iConnection. Really excited to dive into the tips for you guys to use in your own campaigns today, and then also let you hear from our guest speaker, Jay. One thing I just wanted to note before passing it to Randy is that something that is super interesting about email marketing is that although the marketing landscape has evolved and changed over the years, it is still one of the top contenders in the type of materials that drive results within marketing. So it's able to drive you customers and get you the business that you really want to see. And with that, looking forward to giving you guys some more insights, and I will pass the introduction baton to Randy.
Hi, everybody. Ariel said my name is Randy. I'm also an account manager here at IQ Connection. I have about 7 years of professional digital marketing experience, and 5 of those have been pretty email driven. So really excited to share some of my personal tips, especially moving forward throughout this panel today. But I won't go on for too much longer. We do have a special guest. So Jay, take it away.
Hi, I'm Jay Schwedelson. I do a bunch of random stuff. I have a website called subjectline.com. It's a free tool that a lot of marketers use to check subject lines, get email information. We put on a really large email event called Guru Conference, and I have an agency that we do a lot of work in the email space, not just email. So we did last year about 6 billion emails sent for our clients. So that's where a lot of our trends and stats and data come from, and that's who I am.
Awesome, thanks. So I want to kick things off today by talking about how manufacturers are unsuccessful in email right now. A lot of times people want to dive into email without really understanding it. Randy, I know that you have a lot of experience working with IQ emails, working with manufacturers. Do you have anything that you've noticed in your email development over time with that?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I've noticed is that manufacturers and really anyone in any business setting is more so focused on their perspective in sending an email in terms of, I want to put this offer in front of somebody and we'll just figure out the rest of it later. But you have to come at it from the recipient's understanding of what they're seeing and understand what they want moving forward. So in terms of what makes people unsuccessful in email, them not centering the reader in their campaigns when they're crafting any sort of message. And I think that extends beyond email, but it's a particular issue there. I do want to open the floor up to everyone else, Jay, especially since this is really your forte. Ariel, Jay, do you have anything to add?
So in general, I think manufacturers, don't take this wrong way, everyone that's listening, but they're epically boring. They look at email oftentimes and they're checking a box like, great, we got it out. Thank God it's done, whatever it is, your newsletter, your offer email, whatever it is. And they're checking a box that they got it out the door. And 9 times out of 10, they're like, what did so-and-so company do? And they're just copying somebody else in their sector. And they're like, but looks like that. It's got to be fine. Let's get it out the door. And it's boring, copying boring, that's copying boring, and not realizing what Randy said, which is we're all just marketing human beings. And if your subject line doesn't really get the person excited to open up the email, if your headline's not exciting, if your call to action buttons aren't exciting, if you have these really long blocks of words with these boring images, nobody is going to respond because it's still a human being, right? And I think that is the mistake in the B2B nitty-gritty manufacturing sector. They think, oh, we're supposed to be really boring and rigid because that's what we're promoting. But in reality, it should be the polar opposite. So I think that's the biggest fail and why manufacturers have a very hard time with email.
Yeah, if I could jump in really quickly, I feel, ladies, we all talk to manufacturers very often. And I feel like when you start talking to them, they are really excited about what they do. And I think they just need to make sure that they translate that moving forward rather than, as Jay said, fitting into the norm of what manufacturers do. When you're marketing, you want to stand out. So be as exciting in your email as you are excited in your day-to-day operations. That is really going to be your first tip to not be unsuccessful.
Yeah, if you even just talk about like the subject lines of manufacturers, right? Let's say a manufacturer is going to do a webinar of some kind, right? What do? They'll have a subject line. The first word is going to be like webinar, : whatever is on Thursday. Literally, it could not be more boring. Nobody cares that it's a webinar. Webinar is the most boring word in the English language. It's really, what is that thing that you're promoting? How is it going to benefit me? So you're better off saying something like, whatever the hero trend or stat is, 71% of manufacturers are doing this. Oh my God, what is it? And you open up the message, like, I want to be involved with that. Or even a subject line that says something like, just for manufacturers. Oh my God, that's me. I'm a manufacturer. I need to check this out. The sooner in the subject line, you could either grab attention with something that's really exciting, to Randy's point, or telling the person who they are, just for manufacturers, just for C-level executives, just for small businesses that are starting out. Whoever it is that you're marketing to, if you actually tell them in the subject line who they are, it immediately resonates with them and they want to get engaged. So oftentimes manufacturers do it all backwards. They spend all this time on the creative, the offer, the messaging. They spend no time on that subject line. Nobody opens it. And the whole thing goes into the garbage can, where you got to get that email opened every single time. Yeah.
That's a really good point. So that kind of brings us into our next topic of what types of emails actually get opened. What are people actually interested in getting information about?
I think the mistake in manufacturing is that the manufacturers have information that they want to get out. This is what we want to tell people. And it's never really, the thought is not really, what's in it for me, the recipient? How is this relevant to me? What am I getting out of this? And sometimes the emails you send out need to just be really exciting, compelling information with no ask. You're not asking them to download something. You're not asking them to sign up for something. You're not asking them to buy something. You say, hey, here's this really cool new trend that we're seeing in the industry. Here's the stat. Here's the thing we just saw. That's it. All of a sudden, you become a thought leader in their inbox. The next time you go to send something, you have that relevancy to them. You're like, oh, this sender sent me something useful. Let me check out what else they have to say. And so this idea of just pounding them with offer after offer, register down, it's wallpaper and boring, that it's got to be what's in it for me, the recipient, and not what's in it for you, the sender, whenever you're putting together your marketing plan. And I think that's the fail. That happens all the time.
I've been doing email for a long time, and I feel like I have been guilty of that in the past. I think that's something that everyone needs to learn, especially if you're new in email marketing. It's good to get that lesson up front, but I think people who do work in email have often, or maybe not often, or at least once, run into that issue where they are fatiguing their audience by constantly asking something of them without really delivering them value. A lot of manufacturers are getting, hundreds of emails a day at least, which means you have to be putting value in their inbox for them to interact with your brand overall. And then from a manufacturer to their other business to business clients, it's a similar situation, especially when you're up at those C-suite levels. So in terms of providing value, I think there are a couple of different formats that you can still do that with. I think a newsletter is a great way to provide value to your customers or your contacts who are more, hesitate to say fans, but people who are pretty loyal to your brand, who know you really well. They are going to be interested in those pieces. If you frequently go to trade shows and you send out a message to some folks who you've met at trade shows past, hey, we'll be there again, hope to see you at X, Y, and Z networking event. And then if you are going to do an offer, make sure that it is personalized to whatever that list segment is, and making sure that it's something that actually is relevant to them. No one is going to open an email that is completely irrelevant. If I met you at a trade show, I might not care about whatever discount you're running out on tiny precision manufacturing pieces. So I think really the type of email that gets opened is anything with a compelling subject line that matters to you. But we get into kind of a bigger conversation about what emails actually get read if we keep going down this rabbit hole. So if anyone has any thoughts on what really does get read by users, not just what gets opened, happy to hear them.
I think I'd like to change it into seeing what we can provide people when we're talking about the content and design within the email format. The type of layout obviously matters. And I think within the B2B space specifically, there's a lot of content and information to get out. You're always trying to educate people or educate your clients. So that's a big portion. And you don't want to have an email that's full of text because no one's going to read it. Jay, I'm curious. I want to hear from you. What would you think would be a good layout format between having design in comparison to the actual text that's within the newsletter? Do you see anything that really performs well over and over again for your own company?
Yes, that's a great question. There's a couple of things that I would always think about what the elements of inside the message. So there's really two types. There's letter format and then there's graphic heavy. So let's talk about the graphic heavy for a second. First off, nobody's actually going to read your email. Sorry, no one cares what you're writing. So what they are going to look at though is the headline first. They're going to see the headline and it's got to say something awesome. whatever it is, it's going to be like 7 words, whatever it is, it's got to really grab their attention. And then you're going to have some words. You cannot have more than 75 words in your email if it's not a letter format, because after that, nobody will care. But even when you have 75 words, it's got to be bulleted. You can't have paragraphs with more than 3 lines, because it's like when you get a text message from a friend or relative, right? And it's like a big blob in your text. You're like, I'm not reading that. I'm going to get to that later because that means somebody's really drama going on. I don't have time for that right now. But when you see it in an email, you care less. You're like, I don't even like this company. I'm not reading that paragraph. So you really got to think about the size of your paragraph, the number of words, and then the secret sauce. There's 3 secret sauces in your email. Number 1, your logo. Nobody ever thinks about this, but about 20% of all the click-throughs in your email are going to be on your logo. And so if you're sending out an email that has an offer, are you sending that traffic to the home page or are you sending it to the offer destination page? 1 in 5 clicks, that's a lot on your logo. So you want to think about every conduit to response and where you're sending that traffic. Because a lot of times we don't think about the logo. The next piece, though, is the call to action button. The language, the words that you put on that button are secret sauce, right? So often it's you're getting them to download some piece of content. It says download. You're trying to get them to register for a webinar. It says register. Those are the worst words on earth, right? They're almost like borderline rude. They're really weird. And if, let's say, you're promoting a webinar, what sounds better to you? I want in or register or save my spot or register. When in the B2B email marketing space, when call to action buttons, the actual buttons in your email are written in the first person, click-through rates rise by over 20%. And all you're doing is changing the frame of mind of what people are seeing. And then the last piece is a PS. Having a PS in your email does incredibly well. It'll get you an additional about 14% click-throughs if you add a PS with whatever your offer is and a link, because the way that we read emails is subject line opens the email, headline, maybe a few words, and then the PS. And that's what we do. So those are the elements inside of the email that I think are super valuable to really always be thinking about.
I love that. And it actually ties back to your previous message about always providing that benefit to the viewer or the reader. You're not doing it to have people come and do something for your business. You don't want to command someone to say, hey, register, hey, download, whatever. If you give them something like complimentary consultation, someone's more likely to click on it because they know that they're getting a value out of it. I love that messaging. I think that's really important to keep throughout the entirety of your newsletter. And I think I'd like to maybe pass it over to Randy because I know she has some ideas on some things that we should not be doing in our newsletter. So I will pass it over to her for that one.
Yeah, and I had some thoughts and some notes, but I'm going to go around because when we start talking about these more interesting CTA pieces, it makes me think of things that I think people have previously thought of as like super important in your emails, which is avoiding these spammy words. You're going to get stuck in a spam filter. You can get stuck in a spam filter and you are going to. There are technical issues that cause that, but I think that should be your number one piece. But when we are using our language in email, I think that is a little bit more important to think about from just, again, the reader's perspective. So when you're putting together your CTA language, register now is boring. Save my seat is pretty fun. Don't miss out. It's fun, but you start to hit this area where it's, am I pushing someone into this feeling of I'm going to miss out if I don't interact with this brand in this way versus building a relationship. So you have to be a little bit careful in terms of how you are framing things. I also like to use a couple other rules. Don't be too needy. Don't ask people for help, even if you are in the nonprofit space, which I was operating in that space for a long time. I don't think I wrote the word help a single time. You also, of course, want to make sure that your language doesn't make you look cheap. So think about your brand, think about your brand's voice in your emails. And of course, don't say anything that's really out of left field. Anything that's far-fetched or a too good to be true type of offer is just going to damage your brand in an email perspective, or excuse me, from a branding perspective. So those are my main things. When it comes to your language, make sure that you are sounding professional. I also always advise against using things like link shorteners in your emails or using an open link, both from how email inboxes are going to read it, but also from how your user is going to read it. I prefer when you see linked text versus when you see visit our website, www.iconnection.com. So those are just a couple of pieces there. And of course, make sure that your reply to email is always something that's actually going to work for people. So no more of this no reply at company.com. Those are really just I would say my email sins from now until forever.
So Randy, I feel like you're not going to like me when I say this, though, which is sad. No, I think, and you touched on it a bit, but the idea of spam trigger words, It drives me a little bananas, only because other than maybe in the government sector, maybe some in the education, for the most part, I would say 99% of the time, spam trigger words really shouldn't be a factor, in my opinion, in how you're writing your subject lines, your body copy. As you alluded to, the reason you go to the junk folder or the spam folder is because of your technical engagement, your technical reputation that you have, how much engagement, opens and clicks you're generating from the people you're sending with. I want to almost liberate everybody that's watching and to know that you could put the word free in your subject line. That's not the reason you're going to go to the junk folder. You could use brackets and start your subject line with brackets and put a word in brackets. It's not going to cause you to go to the junk folder. You can capitalize a word. You could use an exclamation mark. You can use a question mark in the subject line or in your body copy. It's not going to be the reason you go to the junk folder or the spam folder. You don't want to sound spammy, which I think is what Randy was alluding to, right? Because that sounds lame. But you shouldn't hold yourself back from a content perspective and a writing perspective, because that's not it used to be the reason 10 years ago. It's not the reason you're going to the junk folder anymore.
I think that's a really good point in terms of tips for email marketing. Don't be boring. Jay, you made a point in another conversation I had seen you had in the past about you have an equal stake in an inbox. It doesn't matter how much money you put out. You want to take advantage of the space that you do have in someone's inbox and make it something interesting so they open, and then you get put into their inbox more and more people. And it's really like a positive feedback loop of you make interesting content, people open it, you get pushed to the top of the inbox and over again until you're really hitting your numbers and goals through email.
Yeah, and along those lines, don't be turned off. This is not a popular opinion, but this is my opinion. Don't be turned off by unsubscribes, by people removing themselves, or even getting people that send you a nastygram. I hate you. Why are you emailing me this? You're a horrible person. And a lot of marketers, especially in the manufacturing space, make the mistake of they send out an email and they get back unsubscribes. And maybe they'll get a nastygram, and the nastygram will float around their business to the CEO or whoever, then back down to the marketing manager to their inbox. And then the CEO will be like, what is this? Why are we sending this out? We need to stop our email. And then invariably, what do? You're like, oh my God, we're sending out too much email. That's why we got this really upsetting unsubscribe. And you let the loudest voice in the room dictate your marketing, which I think is an epic fail, because the reason I say that is, let's say you watch this webinar and you're like, oh, wow, that crazy guy Jay talked really fast. And I heard him say, use brackets in the subject line. I've never done that before. I'm going to try it. Right? Okay, great. You put brackets in there and you write, in the brackets, you put the word today, and it stood out. You got a really high open rate, higher than you've gotten in the past. But oh no, you've also gotten a higher unsubscribe rate. More people have unsubscribed than ever before. And you're like, that must be because we did something wrong. But it's not. What happened was you sent out something and it actually stood out for the first time in a million years. The recipient saw these brackets and they opened up your email. You've been wallpaper up until now. They haven't seen your emails, but you stood out subconsciously to this person. They opened it up and they checked out your email. You know what? I'm not even in this space anymore. My job changed, my role changed. I don't need the thing that they're selling. I'm going to unsubscribe. And that happened a bunch of times because you stood out. So your unsubscribe rate went up because you did something good, not bad. So internally, you need to always manage expectations that, hey, we're going to be testing new things and it may cause this result, but that doesn't mean we're doing something wrong. It means we're doing something right. And I just think framing internally what you're doing with email marketing is super important before you hit the send button, because people need to be on your team or else they're going to try to get you to stop.
Yeah, I would say just on that point too, you don't want to just be emailing an audience. You want to be emailing the right audience, and the wrong audience is going to be the ones who are unsubscribing to your emails.
Totally agree with that. Yeah, unsubscribes are fine. Relax. And I don't care about nastygrams. Nastygrams are weird. People that send in nastygrams need to get a life.
Who has the time? Who has the time for that?
No, just write unsubscribe. It's fine. I've never in my life written in a nastygram ever. I don't know who these people are, but they're not happy. I know that.
They're probably the same people that do the Yelp reviews, let's be honest.
Yes, that's
The
right.
horrible Yelp reviews.
It's true.
Is there a time of day or a day of the week that you find that people are more nasty with their intake of emails? You find Monday morning, people do not want to be getting emails or anything like that.
I do think it's a good point, is that different times of the week, people have different appetite for different stuff. What you're interested in Friday afternoon is very different than what you're interested in Tuesday. But the one thing I'll tell you about timing, and we see this in manufacturing quite a bit, is People in the manufacturing space all do the same exact thing. Is when they're setting up their emails, they do this. They go, when should our email go out? It doesn't matter the day. They'll say 8 a.m., 10 a.m., 2 p.m., 11 a.m. Nobody in the manufacturing space says 8:13, 9:22, 11:28. And the reason that matters is if you send your email out not on the hour, B2B manufacturing, you'll see an open rate increase. The percentage of people opening up your emails rise by about 15% just by sending it not on the hour. And the reason is 80% of all email for everybody is sent out on the hour. So in those first 10 minutes in your inbox every hour is all the promotional email. It's never the one-to-one email. After that first 10 minutes is when all of the really more personalized email shows up from your friends, relatives, whoever. And that's what stands out more. And that's what you're interacting with more. So just by not being there for the first 10 minutes, you can see a boost. And, when people say email doesn't work for us, doesn't work for our business, it's because they're not looking at email and understanding it's a series of very little things. There's never going to be one thing that you're going to do that's going to make email work for you. It's like 100 little things. And even though email's been around forever, they're always changing, always little things that are changing. So these little things like that timing, it matters. And I don't know what you guys see for your emails you send out, but it matters.
Yeah, I can absolutely agree that it does. I'll admit, I don't think I've ever scheduled one for 8:13, but I've definitely been scheduling for 8:20. But beyond like slight changes to your send time, for example, to try to be more personal with your messages, we've talked a lot about subject lines and CTAs, and we've talked a little bit, I think, about our send from settings today. But I think the main thing about email is when we talk about these hundreds of things that could be different when they work for your business, is that you have to be testing something every single time. If you have a third-party email system, something that's outside of like your Outlook or your company Gmail or something, it will have the ability to A/B test just about anything. And it really is your prerogative to make sure you test something every time. Always have your control, but have something else. I think we've talked a lot about these general rules of thumb when it comes to email, but at the end of the day, a certain level of personalization beyond including somebody's name in a subject or in the email is really tailoring your strategy to your audience. In general, yeah, register now is boring, or buy now, download now is boring. But what if it's the exact thing that's right for your audience? So set one as your control, test the other thing, and keep going until you find what works. Because then again, maybe your audience will like the 8 a.m. on the dot email as opposed to the 8:13. So I think those are all kind of those pieces there, and just keep going until you find what works. That's really all I got for it.
I think my favorite thing that you tested, Randy actually does a really nice job of separating and analyzing the A/B test, because doing it is one thing, analyzing it and getting results and driving your future emails is really the purpose of it. But my favorite thing that Randy had tested in A/B was we have a color emotional analysis guide on our website where you can kind of see how different colors are affecting how people perceive things. And she used that to create different CTA buttons and have the different CTA buttons. And it changed the results. It was pretty significant. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that we fall into this trap often where we email something out there and then the margin will be so thin that it's like, how do you really make a call based off what we're seeing here? So it's less than 1%. I think that time it was like a good 9% difference. So you really do have to think about every piece as tiny as it gets. So I think in that case, it was green versus red. I don't remember why green was a choice, but red, we were like, it's bold, it's authoritative, and people liked it. So when you are designing your email campaigns, I think that's really vital. One piece that I do want to pull out of the back burner that I feel like we haven't gotten to today, and I think a lot of manufacturers will have questions about that, is automated emailing in general. So based around workflows. And I have some thoughts, but Jay, I want to know what your thoughts are around email automation and how to make sure that's as successful as the individual campaigns that you're putting together.
Yeah, so email automation is everything. And there's one piece of email automation that I think manufacturers don't get right, which is the first email that you send to anybody. If somebody subscribes for somebody, registers for something, a salesperson reaches out, literally the first email they get from you, right? That automated email based on them taking an action on a form or anywhere is literally the most important email you're ever going to send to that person. And the reason being is the first time you email to somebody, your sending infrastructure is interacting with the recipient's receiving infrastructure. And what's happening is if that person that's receiving the email opens up the email, clicks on that email, then for the life of your relationship with that individual, you're going to stay in the inbox. Because what's happening is when you hit send, the recipient's infrastructure, when you open and click on it, you're basically telling your infrastructure, hey, I know I never got an email from these people before, but I dig it, I'm into it, so make sure they stay in my inbox. That's what happens when you open and click it. If you don't open and click that first email, what you're telling your infrastructure is, I don't know who this is, and that structure doesn't know that you just registered somewhere. That happened elsewhere. So you're saying, I don't know who they are, I don't care about them, maybe send it to junk next time. So the reason I tell you that is, that first email you send, it can't just be, thank you for registering. If your email is a receipt, you're failing as a marketer, okay? It has to do something insane to get them to open it and interact with it. Thank you, something super cool inside. Thank you, VIP, whatever inside. Thank you, you got to see this. I don't care what it says. That subject line has to be wild, and it has to get the person to open it, and then you want to get them to click on it. You're not trying to sell them anything out, anything extra. Give them anything, extra piece of content, click here, discount, whatever, I don't care. But you need them to open and click that first automated email, because it will radically change your ability to communicate with that person forever. But in general, beyond that, trigger-based emails are a home run. But the one other piece you have to always remember is you cannot be unrealistic. What I mean is, a lot of times these automated email programs, they go out. Oh, if somebody didn't get email in a week, they get this email. If they clicked on this, they get this email. Great. And the problem is, when I say they have to be realistic, is a lot of times the content that we put in those emails, it'll be like the 2023 guide for manufacturing, blah, blah, blah. And you're like out there running around with your head cut off, trying to do all your stuff. And it's now January 2024. And that thing is still firing away that says 2023, whatever, because we're all super busy. You do more of a disservice by having older content send out. So your triggers, your automated emails should really be evergreen content, and you shouldn't be unrealistic with yourself that you're going to be able to keep up with it all the time, because it's hard and you're busy. So evergreen content is key. That first email is key, and I'm a big fan of automated emails.
Is there anything that you guys think that we need to add to this conversation to really help people be as successful as they can be in email marketing?
Actually, yes. I know I just said we're getting away from me talking, but I think we do need to have the kind of the PSA. We need to make sure that anyone who is viewing this with us today is aware of their compliance or their compliance status with GDPR and CAN-SPAM Act. So for folks who are using those third-party email marketing platforms, things like MailChimp, Constant Contact, there is some level of protection built into those pieces, but I know that there are some more homegrown approaches that people use out there that might not have those email automations that we spoke about, but you still have to make sure that you're following these rules when you're sending out these mass emails. So the PSA, GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation. If it's obviously going to be a little bit more complicated than what I'm going to make it sound like, but in general, it is getting explicit consent from your contacts before you add them to a list. That's part of how you keep your emailing list clean and functional, being really transparent about what data you're storing, and also making it easy for folks to have that data that you stored about them deleted if they so request it. And then, of course, having an emergency plan in the case of a data breach. So that is PSA Part 1. PSA Part 2 is the CAN-SPAM Act. So again, this is kind of a legal regulation. Common sense pieces here, but some pieces you need to think of that might not be common sense. Making sure your emails that are marketing pieces always have a mechanism to unsubscribe, honoring that request when it's sent through. Being unsubscribing is fine. It's a good thing. So just let people get out of your list if they don't want to be there. Including your business's postal address might seem a little counterintuitive, but you do need to keep it in there. And as always, avoid deceptive practices. So that's your PSA. Follow the law when you're sending out emails, or you're going to get yourself into trouble.
Facts. Agree. And the only other thing I wanted to add was that, believe it or not, you're probably not sending out enough email, right? Marketers make the mistake. They think, oh, we send out a monthly newsletter, and maybe we should go to quarterly because like we're annoying people. The best marketers on the planet happen to also be the most frequent senders. And you're not going to send your way less and get more business. That's bad math. It doesn't work. So you just need to focus on being more relevant with what you're sending. And the more relevant you are, allows you to send more frequently. But if you're not sending enough, a monthly newsletter is not good enough. A weekly newsletter is where it's at least The average B2B marketer sends, believe it or not, over 3.5 emails a week. The average B2B marketer. And I'm not telling you that you need to be above that average or whatnot, but if you're sending out one email a week or one email every 2 weeks, you're not even in the ballpark, right? So just more relevant equals more frequency, which equals more business. And that's the goal.
Awesome. Well, Jay, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was an awesome conversation, and we will see you in the inbox.